Today's program is part of The Pulse Moments That Matter, a series of frank conversations on culturally relevant topics with musicians, comedians, and other entertainment industry professionals, and is a joint initiative of Moment Live and Neranenah. For nearly 2 decades, Matisyahu, born Matthew Miller, has kept his creative spirit aflame by evolving his sound, melding genres, and testing the limits of the musical traditions that have inspired him. His gold certified 2009 anti war hit One Day has streamed over 150 million times on Spotify alone. His latest EP recording is Hold the Fire. Please welcome Matisyahu and Joe Alterman, Executive Director of Neranenah.
Well, Matisyahu, it's such a treat to be here with you today. I saw you in Atlanta a few weeks ago. You put on an awesome performance. Everyone loved it, and just really excited for this opportunity to speak with you. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Of course. And I thought it'd be great to begin. I'd love to talk a little bit about your upbringing. I'm curious, when you first fell in love with Judaism and when you first fell in love with music. I didn't know if we could maybe go back a little bit.
But yeah, basically, I grew up in White Plains, New York. My parents are Reconstructionist Jews. I went to Hebrew, like public school, and then Hebrew school on Monday, Wednesday afternoon, and Sunday morning. And I didn't really take to it much, but I did go. So I got some background, some information, and some skills in terms of like reading Hebrew. And then I guess after my bar mitzvah, I stayed sort of connected with the shul. My parents were involved there, doing a lot of social action and stuff like that. And basically, they came to talk about a trip to Israel, which was a conservative trip, Alexander Muss High School. So that was when I was 16. That was the first time I went to Israel. And at that time already, I had started really getting into music. I had loved playing ice hockey as a kid, and then I broke my collarbone and couldn't play that season. It's sort of a lot of musicians that I've met is that's similar story. Like they were like athletes who got injured and then like picked up a guitar or sat around smoking weed, listening to Bob Marley all day. And the latter was my case, and not just Bob Marley, but I really started getting into music. At that time, there was a very strong hip hop thing going on. And you're talking about New York in the 90s basically, mid late 90s. So like Wu-Tang Clan and all of those New York rappers. So that was what all my friends were listening to and what was kind of happening around me. But I kind of came from this, I fell in love with reggae music, just kind of, I had cousins from Barbados, so I had some taste for it because they would bring tapes and we would listen to music all summer at summer camp together. But Bob Marley is where I really fell in love with it, and then kind of started listening to more reggae. And then at the same time, I was started going to my first Fish concerts and listening to the music of Fish and Grateful Dead. So I was kind of, and that was more my personality, kind of like a little bit more of a hippie, a little more laid back and stuff. So I was some kind of combination of like the hip hop that was happening, and then I learned how to beatbox. So all my friends that were freestyling like every day at lunch and stuff, that was the thing. So I became into the beatboxing, and I started kind of like learning about music and rhythm and time and sound and all of that through beatboxing. So and took to it pretty well. So I guess my journey really became pretty much centered and focused around music, even though I wasn't, I would play the drums, and eventually, I bought myself a little PA and some pedals, and I would like sing and beatbox and play the drums and come up with stuff. But it's a different time period. It's not a time period when everyone had a studio in their room, and like I have 18 and 17-year-olds who release music and they just can release a song. It was a different thing. It was about sort of like more just creative, and then performing live, like on the street somewhere, like in the by the subway or Union Square Park, or in the park or something like that, on Fish Lot, that kind of thing. So it was like always like live performance was kind of the center of it. And when I was 16, after I got back from Israel, I went to my first Fish concert in Worcester, Mass, with my friend from Israel, and took LSD, and then that just changed my entire like. I just knew like somehow that my soul was like deeply connected with music and that I needed to pursue that in my life. And I
Mm.
didn't know exactly what it would look like, but I just knew that from that point forward.
You could,
But yeah, music, my musical memories as a kid are wonderful because like my parents had really good taste in music. They're not musicians, but they had great taste. And I can remember like my nostalgic happy memories that I have as a child are all linked to like certain music, like driving to Cape Cod for vacation, right? To Wellfleet, like listening to Paul Simon Graceland, right? Like those kind of things, like a lot of my memories are connected to music. So in terms of Judaism, then a little bit later on, like when I was in college, I was in New York City at the New School, and that's really when I started my Jewish exploration. Because up until then, it was more, what fascinated me was the reggae connection to the Old Testament, and so that was really like the first interest. It was like going to Israel and then like having that experience with reggae music that's totally like inspired and comes out of the Old Testament and seeing like the crossover and the symbology that became like really one of the first things that piqued my interest. And then basically basically when I was in college, then I started going through some kind of existential feelings of depression, disconnectedness, loneliness, and anxiety, and a lot of those feelings, and didn't really know how to handle them or how to access them, or deal with them. And I had tried, being in therapy at different times and different things, but I really just made a decision to like take this leap to religion and to God. And that was when I started my real deep exploration of Judaism, starting in New York City as a 20-year-old or whatever. So it was like, wow, you could go anywhere. You could go to Five Towns, you could go to Crown Heights, you could go to Washington Heights, you could go to so many different Jewish neighborhoods all over and try to like explore it. And that's what I did. And then I ended up in Crown Heights.
oh wow. Man, yeah, I was curious how your love of music aided your love of Judaism or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most obvious place that happened was like when I became religious and I went to yeshiva in Crown Heights and just started studying Torah all day long.
Mm.
Not no more kind of like connection to like current culture, so movies and music and all of those things. I stopped, but there was some music in the community, and what it was nigunim, like the Hasidic melodies and songs. So I became kind of like got really into those, and when we would sing them and all of that, and and then I started like envisioning like this crossover between the music that I knew that I grew up loving and had started to formulate in my own mind and heart and soul, and then what I knew and how connected I was to reggae music and the Old Testament crossover there. And I started when I would be like learning text, I would learn something. Okay, from the forest itself comes the handle for the axe. Like, wow, that will be a great chorus. And I'd just make these little mental notes, or I would hear like everybody singing, and I would just like think of like this drummer that I once heard in the subway, and I would like playing like hip hop beats behind like those melodies with those like rabbis singing over it. And then if you mixed in like this kind of dub reggae bass with that and started throwing dub effects on stuff. And so I started kind of like, it all started kind of, at some point, it all started feeding each other. And then that's musically, but more like I would say, like from a songwriting perspective and a lyrical standpoint, at that point, my lyrics started to become like very much inspired from everything that I was learning. So all the
Mm.
Hasidus, the Kabbalah, the Torah, mixed with my life lessons, like, that I was learning basically was what became the lyrical content and inspiration for my entire catalog, basically until, throughout my entire catalog. But at that point, it was like big, really solid part
I
of it.
really admire how you don't stay in one place and you grow as you grow, your music grows. And to me, I feel like music is just such a discovery of oneself. And I've heard you talk a bit about a rabbi at NYU that's been a mentor to you. To me, the mentorship thing is so special. And I actually went to NYU and took a lot of classes with Rabbi Korn. His life story is one of the most fascinating I've ever heard. I was just curious if you could speak a little bit how he's affected you.
I was very close with him for a very short period of time,
Mm,
from the time that I was at the end of my time in college,
mhm,
until I left for yeshiva. So about 6 month period, maybe,
mm,
where I was like living at his house, cooking breakfast for his kids, and sort of like his little slave assistant. And he was kind of like teaching me Hasidus, not teaching me Hasidus, but more like, at that time, basically, you know, I was like, faced with this again, this like existential question at some point of is the Torah true? Like, are all these things the word of God? And if they are, then I have to live my life according to that. Up until that point, it was more like this very organic exploration of Judaism that sort of landed me up at the Karlbach Shul, and started playing music with these three brothers that were like modern Orthodox. And so I started going around with them a little bit, and I started wearing a yarmulke and tzitzis, because it was important to me. I felt like representing myself, out to the world as a Jew at that point, at that time, felt like really the right thing, and that for me. And then, um, I was learning, I was reading books on different rabbis and stuff, and it was like very much still Matt Miller, you know what I mean? And then I met Rabbi Korn, and he really pushed me to like leave Matt Miller behind and become some new version,
mm.
which I really wanted, because at that point, like, I was pretty sick of myself, and not really happy. So I was, and pretty kind of sort of a little bit lost. So I really was looking to become, Matisyahu is in my mind already who I was, looking to become, some other version of myself, some like hyper, super spiritual, intense, life that I was looking for. And and so he kind of was the one who, was like, all right, man, if that's what you're gonna do, you have to like give up everything for it. You can't kind of like still teeter through both worlds. You have to completely dive into this world. And that was obviously incredibly overwhelming. And even though I knew I wanted it, it was intense, because all of a sudden everything that you're used to in your life is basically gone, all of your comforts. And now you're completely immersed into this new culture that's a new culture to you, and new lifestyle. And it's, so it can be like pretty daunting, and you're also faced with this question of, for a person like me, it's like, not just going to do this, like, this has to be right, this has to be the real thing. So is it the real thing, is it not? And that in between of kind of going back and forth is like really a difficult space to be in. And I'll say what Rabbi Korn's specialty was for me at that time was, he really made me feel that I had a friend, that he was so funny and charismatic and lighthearted, and had made the jump already. He had gone from Grateful Dead follower and kid from New Jersey, hippie, to basically become this, like, at the time he was like a 22-year-old dude, religious, married with kids, rabbi, like already of a community, that he had put, he had gone out and found these people. It was before he was at NYU, so it was just like the Washington Square Park community of like random Jews, and all kind of like searching souls and lost Jews in the village. And and so, like, I don't know, 10, 15 people would show up at his apartment, and Sarah was just learning how to cook, and neither of them knew how to be parents or adults, but they were like playing the game, you know, like it was almost like dress up is what it felt like. And Rabbi Korn was like out of his mind, you know, like, you know, believing in the Rebbe, that the Rebbe is Mashiach and he's existing right here in Washington Square Park, and you just have to like try to see it. And we were drinking a lot. He was drinking a lot then, so we would drink tons of vodka and then walk 4 miles to whatever it was. It felt like 4 miles. It wasn't. It was just to the east side, but it was a solid hour walk to the mikvah, you
Mm.
know, and the whole lifestyle. And he made it feel kind of fun and kind of lighthearted and made me feel like, you know, I had a friend, and took me in literally when I was fighting with my parents and wasn't able to exist as a religious person in their house. So it was like I really like lived there, and we had some intense, like incredible experiences. And then we kind of like, you know, fell out of touch. You know, we on very like occasion will send a text message maybe to each other, but not in the last 15 years, I would say. You know, we'll see each other. If we see each other, we give each other a hug. But that was like I said. So once I got to Crown Heights already, it was like, you know, who's the next mentor? Who's the next person
Mm.
that's going to take me to that next place? And then, you know, that continued throughout my whole life.
So where did the name Matisyahu come from, and what does it mean?
Matisyahu is my Hebrew name, like in the sense that Matthew is my
Mm.
English. So Matityahu, and the Ashkenazi pronunciation, like the way that they would pronounce the ta in Crown Heights is with a sa. So that's where you get the matis instead of matit.
Mm.
And that's what you have. Matisyahu is my Hebrew name. You know, that was my Hebrew name in Hebrew school and all of that.
I was curious, what would I know you have so many influences musically and spiritually, and I've always just been curious how you would define your music. Would you call it, a lot of people think it's Jewish music or reggae, I'm just curious how you see it.
I don't really define music, so I mean, some music you can define pretty clearly, but
Mhm.
I'm really not good at defining my own music. It's just
Mhm.
something that I've obviously been asked probably like 100,000 times, and I've never been able to give like a good answer really. So
All
I
my
don't know.
mentors, yeah, all my mentors in the jazz world aren't as interested in playing jazz as they are playing who they are. So I totally
Yeah.
get that. I guess I'll ask it differently. Like when I took over then the Atlanta Jewish Music Festival, people said, "Well, you're running the Jewish Music Festival, so you're obviously going to bring in Modest Yahoo, right?" Does that bother you, or do you like being seen like that?
Not at all. I mean, that's wonderful. It's wonderful, especially for that, you know, especially right now, with what's happening. It's like really feel honored and feel like a beautiful responsibility and commitment to trying to be a leader for the Jewish people. And, you know, that wasn't always like my trip. You know, maybe it might have been early on, but it wasn't for the last 15 years. So, but it kind of like came around again now. And in a way, like because of the circumstances, and just my authentic reaction to things, um, you know, and also having been through it already 10 years ago. I was going through this in 2015 with the BDS. So yeah, so I mean, I'm glad to be that person.
I know One Day has become this anthem. I mean, it's been an anthem for a long time, but I was just speaking on that song. I was just kind of curious what made you write that song when you did, and has the meaning of the song or the role of the song changed since October 7th?
Um, well, I made okay, so One Day came out on the Light record, and that was like my second release. So after the youth and live at Stubbs and a lot of touring and stuff, my manager was like, let's just take a long time, take a break, and make a really great record. And I was studying at that point Breslov Hasidus and the story of Reb Nachman of the Seven Beggars with my current mentor at that time, Ephraim Rosenstein, and sort of my teacher, my mentor. And we were breaking it down and kind of creating songs around it. And the whole album was based around the Seven Beggars. One of the songs was called Seven Beggars, the like lead track. And I think Trevor Hall worked on that song with me. Actually, he worked on a number of those songs with me on guitar. Um, but just basically, yeah, we made this album. I made it with David Kahn in his basement in like on Gansevoort Street in the in that area of Manhattan. And every day I would ride my bike from Crown Heights to Williamsburg, where I would dive in with this like very eclectic minion because I loved the way this one guy led the minion. And it was just really beautiful, loud, and it's great. And then I would ride into the city, and I spent like, before that, they got me like a writing room at the pencil factory in Greenpoint. And, I was like in there, and Adam Deitch was in a room there, and Stu Brooks. And I met a bunch of people there, and we started doing music. But, I was there for 3, 4 months, writing. So, you're talking like this very old way of making a record, where it's like you're taking like over a year just to make the record. And David Kahn was also very like particular and very specific, very detail oriented. I had a history of like overproducing things and layering things. And so it was a very intense process. And at the end of it, Epic had fired their president and hired this woman, Amanda Ghost, who was a songwriter known for like hits like You're Beautiful, the James Blunt song, for writing those songs. And so they brought her in basically at a time when the whole industry was upside down, and they were just like, basically they were like, we need hit songs. And she listened to the record and said, there's no hit song on this album. It's overproduced, and we need a hit. And I had been on tour with an artist named Kanon, who had a song called Waving Flag. That song got used for the World Cup, and one day ended up getting used for the Olympics, the Canadian Olympics in 2010. An interesting kind of thing. But the song was like, when I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag. And then it goes, right? So
Mm.
I asked Amanda Ghost to look into who helped produce and write that song with Kanon. And it just so happened to be that she worked with an A&R that she was bringing in to be my A&R at Epic. And he managed this group called the Schmeezingtons. And they were in LA, and they put me on a flight the next day. I didn't fight them on it. I kind of almost agreed with them that there was no hit on the record. And so I worked with another British producer on another song, but this is the more interesting. This is the song that blew up. So um I flew to LA, and I'm in a writing room with a kid who's like an engineer and two producers, and they're both like really charismatic, and they're great guys. One of them is like on fire, and he's just like he's very clear. What do you want, Modest? And I'm telling him I want my anthem, and we're playing chords and stuff, and he's jumping on the guitar, and he's jumping on the keyboards, and he's jumping on the drums, and he's singing. He's got a great fucking voice, and it's all this. I'm just like, dude, who is this guy? Anyway, I leave to go like to a dinner, like a kosher dinner that I had to get to Pico Robertson. So I got like traffic across town. I come back like 4 or 5 hours later, and they pretty much rewrote the whole song. So there's not a lot of songs that I collaborated on a lot of songs, but usually lyrically and melodies and stuff, most of the time are coming from me in the past. But yeah, this was like undeniable. It was like, okay, one day, yeah, this is a great song.
Yeah.
They kept like I think my second verse or something like that, and some lines and some melodies I had, but basically they did it. And then he was like leaving because he was trying to get a record deal, and he kept like going to play for people, and he kept coming back disappointed,
Mm.
like, Modest, how did you get a record deal? Like, like, so anyway, he got a record deal.
Man,
You
that's
know who
fascinating.
you know who it
Oh,
was?
no.
Bruno Mars.
What? Oh, that is wild. Man, well, thanks for
That's
sharing.
that's the
That's
story of wonder.
how have you felt that song has been, since October 7th? I mean, it's like the song for the Jews around the world. It's like the anthem of this time to me, I think. But do you feel that?
But, I mean, it's always been pretty like it's one of those songs that like you kind of like we knew from the very beginning, like even though we didn't get radio, and we didn't get like at that time radio was a big deal, and we didn't get any radio love on that song. It never really got added to any stations. I like traveled around the country for like 6, 8 months away from my kids, like playing in like top top 40 stations with like the radio guy and like, people that had never heard of me, even after King Within a Crown, because it was like a whole nother push to top 40. And then the promotions team got fired basically, and I got dropped, and that song never got on radio. But the song, we knew that that song was always going to be huge, that it was just going to continue to grow over time. It's like, it's one of those, it's one of those things that just like hits home, it just like, it just connects with that place inside you.
It's really special. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so is Ascent, and I was kind of curious about the new album. I mean, Ascent I know was filmed at the Nova site. But I'm assuming you've been working on the album for a long time. Like, was the album done before October 7th, or the song written before October 7th?
But yeah, I started writing a bunch of songs last year, like last maybe spring, winter, um, of 2023. And it was a great process. I did this song collaboration writing camp thing where I worked with a bunch of different other artists, singers, and producers, and really, really like came out with a bunch of stuff. So I have like 40 songs that I'm going to be releasing. Five of them were part of the EP, the Hold the Fire EP, and I'm kind of probably going to release them in chunks, like as EPs over the next year or so. Um, so Ascent was one of those songs from that batch of songs. But it was done before October 7th. It was done after the Kanye stuff. And I was like thinking, people were asking, are you gonna sort of like, respond, or what do you think about it? And I wasn't thinking about it that much, but when I heard this beat, it just like automatically I just started writing about sort of anti-Semitism, and I was really happy with how the song came out, and went to Israel, filmed the video after October 7th, obviously at the Nova site, and then the kibbutzim and the hostage square in Tel Aviv, and with survivors, and we just it became like a it really became like a powerful piece for me. I think that it's important, and I think it's a great song. So yeah, it's been a song that I play every night on tour when I'm on tour, and I think
Mm.
it's much needed because like Jews need right now, we need to feel strong, and we need to feel like empowered. We don't need to be. I don't think we need to be for begging for forgiveness from anyone, or second guessing ourselves, or you know unsure. Now is the time for for us to stand up. So I feel like it's a good song for that. Yeah.
I've heard interviews where you talk a lot about or referenced finding good in the bad, and I'm just curious, are you hopeful that, or what positive element do you potentially see coming out of all of this? Are you thinking like that?
Yeah, I mean, the good that's going to come out of this is like that the Jews, like, there's this idea in the Torah of like the oil gets crushed, the olives get crushed, and it gives you like the oil. It's the idea of lemonades or whatever, like, but in Torah it's oil, it's olive oil, and the Jews are compared to the olives, and it's kind of a sad thing, and it's kind of like a little bit of an intense thing to say, but in some way, like the Jewish people really shine when we're squeezed, like when we are up against something. We're survivors and fighters, and we do our best under a little bit of pressure, I think, and I think that that's what you'll see, and it's horrible what happened, and like you said, we have to mourn, and it's so sad, thinking of these families and the hostages, and what's happening, across the board, to Palestinians, to Jews, to Israelis, all over.
Mm.
But it's really, hopefully, it will bring us together and make the Jews stronger, and make Israel stronger.
Wow. Well, I love the olive comparison. That's a beautiful thing. I just had two more questions, if that's cool. And one was, I was just curious if you could speak a little bit about the art behind you. You know, kind of on that same topic a little bit.
The art?
Yeah, yeah. The
Oh,
Jewish.
oh, this art.
Yeah,
Oh, this art.
that art. Yeah,
Not
yeah.
the art behind Matisyahu, but the art behind Matisyahu.
Yeah.
This is Judah. It's the star, obviously, that the Jews wore on their sleeves in
Mhm.
Germany. I was with my tour manager, and we went into a friend of his art studio and was checking out his stuff. And I just saw that, and I just was like, I really want that. And I took it with me, like I think on the tour bus. Like it's pretty heavy. It's like made out of wood. And,
Wow.
yeah, the guy who made it, his wife, I guess his name is Judy. So I guess he made that for her.
Brings me to, I know a few of your shows were canceled post October 7th, and I'm just curious, like, what's your reaction to that? Did it feel, anti-Semitic to you?
Ah, yeah, for sure. I mean, there are people that were really, really, yelling horrific things at the fans coming in and anti-Semitic slogans about murdering Jews from the river to the sea or Antifada or any of these things. There's no two ways to see them other than anti-Semitic. We know that part of the whole concept behind Hamas and these terrorist organizations is the elimination of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. It's not like a mystery. So that's pretty anti-Semitic when you're calling for the death of Jews, at someone's concert. So yeah, it was definitely, and it was intense, and I think for my fans and myself, it was actually turned out to be quite special, and it's that same idea of being squeezed and literally as the fans are coming into the concert and they're funneling into security, they're having to deal with protesters yelling stuff, and you just see them start, like they're shining, like they're not afraid. Like of course there's some people that are, but the majority of the Matisyahu fans are like dancing and singing and flags out and just not afraid. And then they squeeze in through and they come into this place where they can just be themselves, listen to beautiful music and great music and feel connected to their identity and their roots and their history. And it's a spiritual experience. It's communal and it's joyful. And you see this transition from the outside to the inside, and it's very beautiful. So I think it was again, it was tough for us on a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways, the shows were extra special.
Brought you closer together with the audience. Yeah. Um, well, I know, music is the ultimate connector, and I've heard you speak a lot about this, or a bit about this. I was just curious, what that should mean in this time, or like how you think about music being the ultimate connector now.
Well, I mean, hopefully people are listening, the right people are listening to music. It's a
Mm,
time when obviously like our enemies aren't listening to anything. They're on a mission. And so, music is important. It's important for inspiration and it's important to like help us feel connected and it feeds our souls. The idea of like music uniting the world is a little far-fetched, I think, right now, but it doesn't mean that we can't stop trying, and we can't, obviously we need to continue to play for, that's what we do.
yeah, yeah. Well, I saw Modi recently, and he said something at the end of the show. For the last hour and a half, none of you have thought about the war. Do
Oh yeah.
you see what you're doing as because as a distracting from not distracting, but people get to come together around the music, but they're not necessarily talking about it or stressing over it in the moment when they're at your shows.
Yeah, for me it's music, so it's emotion, so it's not really so much about the intellect or the ideas, so in that sense it's a break from it in that way.
Mm.
But it's certainly not a distraction from it because like at my shows I have photos of the hostages on stage, and very much, not that I'm speaking about it the whole time, but my songs and the context of my songs have changed, and I'm thinking about it and putting it out there. So praying for those people through the music. So um, I think it's different than what a lot of people are getting all day long. You know, like 24/7, like all the time. So it's a break for them, but it's more than a break. It's more of like it feeds their soul in a way that is a release, maybe.
Hmm. Release is better than distraction. Yes, that's the word. Well, last question, and this is really the last. Yeah, I was just curious, give you an opportunity to share anything you want to about your new album. I know, it's important for people to know there's new music out there.
Yeah, the albums. Well, the last piece of music that I put out is called "Hold the Fire." It's from a dream I had. It references Moshe and the burning bush, um, of like who is able to speak to God, and to hear the voice of God, and it happens through this fire that doesn't consume itself. Idea being like, as an artist, not consuming yourself with your own flame or letting it go out, but stamina and endurance over time. Um, so Moshe is drawn from the river, so he represents the aspect of water, and that's why he's able to not get engulfed in the flames of the burning bush.
Hmm.
And that's the theme. That's the theme of the record, but it's very much, connected, even though it was written before October 7th. It feels like it wasn't. It feels really much like it was from after. So
Yeah,
I think it's been a source of inspiration for quite a few people. Check it out.
definitely. Are you itching to play something? You're welcome to if you.
I am.
Yeah, feel free.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Well, no, it's been a treat to talk to you, really. I just wanted to thank you so much. Yeah, I know uh, you're really vulnerable and sharing so much. I really appreciate you doing so. And I know our audience will love it too. Just
Thank
really
you.